Good evening. Welcome to Kern Fire Safe Council's April 2022 community-wide webinar. Every month, we invite experts to take on a topic to assist you with wildfire preparedness, resilience, and recovery. I'm Julia Neiman, your host for this evening. Our expert tonight is a familiar guest, Andrew Freeborn. Andrew is with the Kern County Fire Department. He's the Public Information Officer, and he's here with Matt Redstone, who is the Hazard Reduction Coordinator. And they're going to talk with us about defensible space and answer the frequently asked question, what is my responsibility? If you have questions for Andrew or Matt, we'll have a Q&A session after the presentation, and you'll be able to unmute yourself and ask your questions, or if you prefer, you can post it in the chat box. There's a section on the website at kernfiresafe.org where you can voice your concerns, ask questions, and make suggestions. Kern Fire Safe Council is a community organization with the goal to educate Kern County residents on how to prepare for, survive, and rebuild after a wildfire. There are many resources on our website to help you, and your feedback is always welcome. And now I'm turning this over to Andrew Freeborn from Kern County Fire with answers to what you're responsible for when it comes to defensible space. It's all yours, Andrew.
Well, thank you very much for the introduction. Thank you for allowing us to come here on behalf of the Kern County Fire Department and speak on these matters, these topics that are very important. When we think of defensible space, maybe we're thinking that it is a luxury. Maybe individuals in our community may think of defensible space as an option. But in all reality, defensible space is something that is a must. It's something that is every individual's responsibility. We have a brochure as an example. We have a brochure here in the Kern County Fire Department, and it talks about how firefighters, we work and we do certain things to prepare for wildfires. But ultimately, it is every individual's responsibility, personal responsibility. We all have that equally to take steps to ensure that we are thinking safely, that we are setting ourselves up for success, that we are providing for our own safety. Our safety isn't necessarily our neighbor's obligation or any agency's obligation. We all need to do what we can to be safe. And defensible space is certainly something that will help us in that regard. They have kindly allowed me to be a co-host so I can do some screen sharing here. So I'd like to share a couple points from that brochure that I was referencing earlier. Here we'll see in the brochure from the Kern County Fire Department, it's really hitting on two subjects. It's hitting on defensible space, and it's hitting on this Ready, Set, Go program. And the reason being is these two items, they work very closely together. If you're developing a Ready, Set, Go plan, you are thinking about defensible space. When we visit Kern Fire Safe Council, their website, the Kern County Fire Department's website, CAL FIRE, Forest Service, whatever these agencies are that are out there as agencies that are working to help you be prepared, they're going to be saying the same thing. We're all giving that same message. And the reason being, as you see here on this slide, is defensible space works. Defensible space is making sure that our property is cleared in such a way that it's going to limit the fires that will start on our property. If there's a fire burning across our property, it will limit the intensity and how quickly that fire will spread. And it will allow the firefighters to have a safe area to work from. There are all kinds of guides that will help us to see what exactly is required within the certain spaces around our properties. And all of those are listed on these different resources that each of these agencies have, such as how to clear right up around the building. For example, we don't want to see an individual with all of their firewood stored against the side of their house. We don't want to see a bunch of dead grass right around the landscaped area of a home. We don't want to see in the areas that extend beyond that a lot of, let's say, dead trees and other things that they should have removed. And to speak on really some of the specifics here, we do have engineer Matt Redstone with us this evening, from the Kern County Fire Department as well. Matt is involved throughout the entire hazard reduction program. And a lot of the questions that come in from our community, even from the conversations that firefighters have with members of the community, oftentimes get routed back to Matt. And it's Matt who knows what are those common questions we're getting about the actual requirements on a property. What would I have to do not to be fined? What dates are we looking to have this kind of work done within? What's the process? And so at this point, I'd like to maybe turn it over to you, Matt, to see if you can go ahead and help kind of answer a few of those points for our community.
Sure. Thank you, Captain. I appreciate that. Before I really get into the meat and potatoes of the program, I just wanted to make a couple of things, clarify a couple of items that Captain Freeborn mentioned. As far as the requirement for hazard reduction, he mentioned that it's important, and it is, but it is also state law. There is no option to not do it. If you are within the requirements, the areas that require it, there is no option. It must be done, and it must be done by June 1st. Those dates have changed, to my knowledge, only once. Previously, it was June 15th, and that is one thing we do get a lot of confusion on, is the date. But the date has been June 1st for several years, and I have not heard anything along any lines that it may change. So June 1st is the deadline for homeowners to have their hazard reduction completed. And like Captain Freeborn mentioned, our website, there's a hazard reduction section that has several graphics that really kind of illustrate, exactly what we're requiring. I will say this, in the previous graphics, the second thing I wanted to mention was the previous graphics that Captain Freeborn showed actually showed things that are not required as of yet, but will be required soon. And so we are discussing those now as a way to educate the public. So on the graphic, you'll notice he had 3 different zones: a 0 to 5 feet, a 5 feet to 30 feet, and a 30 to 70 feet for 100 feet total. That first zone, that 0 to 5 feet, that is the only thing that is currently not required by either the state or the county of Kern. But it is legislation that is in the process, and I believe it's been passed. It has just not been implemented yet. There will be a deadline at which point it will be implemented. So that's our effort, just to get the message out there. So, because it is a change. It is a change from previous years. Previous years were a 30-foot zone from the house out, and then from that point, from that 30-foot zone, another 75-foot out. So I just wanted to highlight that is different. It is not required. We will not be enforcing it in such as citations, but we are beginning, as you saw, a public education campaign on that aspect of it. So as far as the actual program goes, as I'm sure you can imagine, it is evolving. The state of California is very aware of the issues with wildfires, and there are several things that they have done and several things that they are doing. And I've been involved with the program 3-4 years now, and in those 4 years, it's significantly more sophisticated than it was. So, going back to the deadlines. So the June 1st deadline is the required deadline for homeowners to have their hazard reduction clearances done. After that date, starting June 2nd, the local fire stations, and we do have a very, very small group of people in the prevention office who can do these in addition to the local fire stations, will begin their inspections. If during their inspections, they find a violation, they are required to take a picture of that violation. They will fill out a form or a report that will be given to the homeowner. It'll be given to us, the hazard reduction coordinators. And once that homeowner receives that notification, this is the important part, there is an appeal process and it's automatic. If you have 15 calendar days from the day that the citation is postmarked to appeal that, there's an email address on the form. All you need to do to appeal that is correct the violation, take a picture, and email it to the hazard reduction email account. Once that's done, it's either myself or one of two others. So there's 3 of us total. We monitor that account daily. Once fire season kicks off for us in June, we check it every half hour or so because it's a significant amount of emails and we realize there's a time crunch. But the important point is if you receive a citation, there's a process to mitigate it. It's not an automatic fine. It's really more of a warning that this is coming and it's time for you to do your work. We will usually take about a month or so to do the inspections. So it's possible that your home won't be inspected on the 2nd, but I wouldn't count on it. I would assume that June 1st is a hard deadline. There are no extensions granted. We, as the County of Kern, we are not allowed to be less restrictive than the state of California. All we can do is enact ordinance that make state laws more restrictive. We have not made things more restrictive, but the state of California does not allow for any extensions. So it's imperative that the people are aware of these deadlines because our hands are tied. These dates are set in stone. After the first round of inspections are done, we will then go out and do a second round of inspections only for those houses that have an initial violation. If the work has still not been done, they will receive a second citation. They will still have the same 15-day appeal process. The process is exactly the same to get the work done. And if that is received, that second citation will be removed. However, if they wait for their second citation to arrive, the first citation is irrevocable at that point. We're past the expiration date. It will take effect and we have no ability to adjust that. The only time that these things are ever changed is if the homeowner does the work that is required and is now in compliance, or if there was some sort of error on our side. For example, they took a picture of the neighbor's house and it was attributed to your address, things like that. The other aspect of the hazard reduction program is, I think it's a bit misleading because there's a lot of stuff that goes on behind the scenes. So the stations will go out and they'll do their inspections and the citizens will see them. After that part, there's processing and then there's appeals and then there's secondary inspections and there's phone calls and there's getting information out, things along those lines that all happen behind closed doors, or not behind closed doors, excuse me, behind the scenes. So it may not look like we're doing anything, but we are. Currently, when I first started, this was a 6-month out of the year job, and now it's 12 months. It takes 2 of us to do all this stuff just to get ready. I did want to backtrack. One other thing that we do is we do send information out prior to June 1st as just a notice, as a notification of that it's a summary of what the program is, what the dates are. It's just information. It's not a citation. It even says it in the paperwork. That's not a citation. And that usually is received in middle of May sometime. So that, in conjunction with signage that's put up usually at common areas like intersections. I know they put it at the entrance to Mill Potrero heading into Pine Mountain Club, so that homeowners as they're going in and out. That is our notification that or to the public that the fire season that hazard reduction is beginning. And we try to give as much information as possible on what is required and when. We also, like I said, have the email that you can feel free to answer. So as far as requirements go, there's one critical thing that I think people have a misunderstanding about, is that there's only 2 types of properties that either the state of California or the Board of Supervisors in the County of Kern have authorized the fire department to inspect and or cite if in violation. And those are properties with homes on them, dwellings, anything over 150 square foot. So anything bigger than like a cover over a well pump or something like that. 150 square feet is very small. So that would include a pole barn. That would include a mother-in-law. It would include a large shed if it's large enough. If it's over the 150 square foot, those, even if there's nothing else on that property, those are still considered structures, and outbuildings, those types of things. So those are still part of the 3 zones, the requirements, the 0 to 5, the 5 to 30, and then the 30 to 70, 30 to 100. The other aspect, and this is where it gets confusing, is vacant lots. So vacant lots, if it's the easiest way to describe it is, if it's a vacant lot surrounded by other vacant lots, we have no authority to enforce hazard reduction. The goal of hazard reduction program for us is a partnership between us and the communities. We can't do anything without you guys. You guys are our biggest help out there, because we will never have enough people or resources to fight back Mother Nature without the local communities helping. So that is where it comes in, and we have to rely on you guys to do your hazard reduction all around the properties. But if you have a vacant lot surrounded by other vacant lots, there's nothing there to save, so to speak. So hazard reduction is, you guys give us a defensible space. So there's areas that we can get in. We can get in that 100-foot zone, regardless of where in that zone. The fire crews can get between the house, the trailer, the structure, and the fire, the head of the fire, and we can make a stand, right? In a vacant lot, there's nothing to make a stand for. So the only exception to that is if your vacant lot, if you are the owner of that vacant lot, and there's a home or a structure, same 150 square foot requirement within that 100-foot zone, you are required to clear along your property line on the vacant lot side. So for example, you had a vacant lot next to a pole barn on a different property. That pole barn is within, say, 50 feet of the property line. The owner of the property with the pole barn still needs to do his 100 feet up to the edge of his fence on the property line. But the owner of the vacant lot needs to clear a 10-foot section along that property line on their side. Now, if that property line is 4 acres long, we're not asking for that. We're asking for some, be reasonable with it. But it basically is a fire break is what it comes down to. Our partnership with you guys is you guys are giving us a chance to get in there and defend, in this example, the pole barn. So I think that's really probably the things we get the most is those two questions is about the vacant lots. And I just want to make it clear, the one thing we do also get is we get a lot of complaints about other neighboring properties. And the reality of the situation is there are, unfortunately, people out there that would rather pay the fines, and there's steep fines. If they don't, they're $500 for the first citation, $1,000 for the second citation. So it's up to and including $1,500. But we cannot, as the fire department, go on private property and clean somebody's lot. I know that's there are people who believe that is the case. I believe it may have been at one time. And to be honest, I will say we are looking at that again as an option, but there's significant legal hurdles to do that. We ask that you just be patient with us. We're working on it. If there is a property that falls under either the having a structure on it or having a structure nearby, we're happy to get an email with the address if at all possible, and we will make sure that the fire stations inspect that lot or that property. Excuse me. As far as the requirements in the zones and stuff like that, I'm more than happy to go over that if you wish. But like I said, on our website, kerncountyfire.org, under the hazard reduction, there's a lot better information than I think I could describe to you. Yeah. But I think really those are the crux of the issues. So Andrew, I'll hand it back to you.
Yeah, thank you for touching on those points, and thank you for clarifying that we may be starting the public education about things that we hope to see our community starting to implement. But as of right now, some of those things aren't something that are being enforced, let's say. So I'm going to show you on the screen now. Here is more or less what we are working with currently. The theme of this Zoom meeting was what's required of us. Well, very simply, it is put, Zone 1, we want to remove all dead plants, grass, weeds around the home. Any dry branches, limbs, leaves, pine needles from our yard around that 30 foot. If there's trees, make sure they're cut 10 feet away from the chimney. Zone number 2, that 30 feet away from your home, all the way out to 100 feet away from your home. We're mowing the grass down. We're keeping that managed. We're moving any of those wood piles outside the 30-foot zone, so it could be into that zone 2. So these are the things that are there's not a lot. There's really not a lot when individuals are asking us what is required of us. We're not asking for a lot, but it goes a long way. Making sure our rain gutters and roofs are clear of dry needles and leaves, making sure there's nothing dead in around the house. Wood piles are moved away from the house. Wood piles aren't against our propane tanks. And then the second half, once again, just touching on what Engineer Redstone was talking about. If our neighbor has a vacant lot and that lot is not within that specified 100 feet of any structures on any neighboring lots, you may not see that neighbor do anything with that vacant lot. They may not even trim that 10 foot. They may not cut that 10 foot around the property line even if that property line isn't within 100 feet of those structures, as he mentioned. So hopefully that clears up some of the questions that individuals have about what they need to be doing, as well as some of the concerns that they have about what maybe neighboring properties are doing or not doing. And we're certainly available for any questions that you may have.
Okay. That was great information. Thank you. I'm trying to turn my video on here. Okay, thank you so much. So it's all this talk about the vacant lots, but what about, I know where I live in Pine Mountain Club, we have a lot of homes on lots where the owners are absent. They're not here. Maybe they're STRs, but nobody clears the lots for them. So is there something we can do about that?
Well, that is a challenge. So we make every effort to contact those people. We get the homeowner's address is directly off the property tax rolls. That's where we get our contact information. And the stuff that we send to local homeowners, we send to them. We've already sent those out because of the time. I mean, we have homeowners everywhere from Europe to Thailand, Australia. I mean, they're all over the world. If I will say that, as far as the process goes, our process isn't any different. So the timelines aren't any different. So it's entirely possible they will get a fine. But beyond the fining them of up to including $1,500, there's not much we can do. It basically violates people. It'd be no different than a police officer going on private property without a warrant. Is basically what it does come down to. I will say this: I've had a few conversations with other areas in the Tehachapi, some of the communities there, where we offer a list of, we call them service providers, a list of folks who will do that type of work. And the people in the local communities were able to get at least a partial list of people who are absentee owners and let them know about this service. Because that's usually what they end up using is, did they hire somebody to come and do the work type of a thing. I believe, there has been talks with fire safe councils and that they are working on something along those lines as well. But unfortunately and it's kind of a double-edged sword. I mean, it's a double whammy with them because they're so far away. A lot of times it takes a long time for the mail to get there. And then if they get a citation, it's past the 15 days, and then they're like, well, to heck with it, I'm already paying. We share your frustration, and if we could, we would do something about it. And I think this is where the local community could really be helpful to us, whether it's stuff through their HOA, information, if they know some of the HOA communities up in the Tehachapi, they handle things like send out water bills, things like that. They could put inserts in there just to let them know, hey, fire season's coming. These are your responsibilities. All that stuff that's on our website is printable. And I would, recommend, doing that. You can put it in their mailbox, even if they're not there, if they're not there this summer, hopefully they'll be here before next summer. So, because we do get a lot of calls going, why did I get? And what happens is if the people don't pay, if they don't actually physically give us a payment, the county puts a lien on the property and it gets put into their property taxes as a fire assessment. So a lot of times in December, we'll get a bunch of phone calls wondering what this $1,500 is on their taxes. So the fine is inescapable. And at that point, it's also irreversible. But we also use that as a jumping off point to educate people that this is a year-round program and it happens every year. And now that the June 1st deadline has been pretty much set in stone, it hasn't changed and it's not going to change anytime soon. It makes it a little bit easier for us.
So what happens if the person doesn't pay the fine? They get the fine on their bill and then they just don't pay it. What are the consequences?
Well, that was a new step.
Well, the only way they couldn't pay would be to not pay their taxity. I'm sorry, Cap, what was that?
No, I was just gonna piggyback on what you were speaking of earlier. It used to not go to the point of going on to their property taxes and having a more or less a lien against their property.
Mhm.
And so that is in itself a way that we have pursued methods to put more teeth to the program, because of the individuals that just chose to, I'd just rather pay the fine and ignore it. Well, now you can't ignore it. One way or another, it will eventually catch up with you. We'd rather it not go that way. We'd rather not have it get to the point where it goes to someone's taxes. We'd rather it not go to the point where we have to fine someone. Best case scenario is that they actually just do the clearance.
Yeah, for clarification, it's not the citation is not a separate charge on their property taxes. The only way they could avoid paying that would be to avoid paying for the property taxes. So,
okay, that's great. So I have a few more questions I want to ask, and then we'll get to our listeners' questions. So is there somebody specific? Does the fire department do the inspections, or is there a specific organization or group that comes around and does those? And inherent in that question, do they only do drive-bys on the street, or do they, because if you can't go on a person's property, you can't know what's in the backyard?
Correct. So to answer your first question, yes, it's station personnel are the ones that do the inspections, the local stations. They, the thought process is there. CAL FIRE, for example, does hire people to do that. But our thought is that the firefighters in the station know the area. Mm-hmm. They know the community. They may not be allowed on property without permission, but oftentimes if it's a familiar face, all they have to do is ask for permission and they will be granted that. We actually are looking into other avenues for inspections, such as drones and those types of things. Yeah. And I'll be honest with you, our guys are pretty smart. If they have to go up a street that's above this house and look down into it with a pair of binoculars, that they'll do it. Other times we'll have a neighbor that has a complaint about their neighbor's backyard. And if the person is willing to let us into their backyard to look over the fence, that's acceptable. We just can't physically put our boots on private property where we have not gotten specific permission.
Sure, that makes a lot of sense. You would think that people would welcome this kind of inspection. They move up here, they're living in a fire danger zone, and you would think they would want to know what to do to keep their property safe or safer.
Well, yeah, and there's additional benefits to that too, homeowners insurances and other monetary reasons that would benefit them as well. I mean, it's the homeowners insurance is challenging right now, and so why you would do anything to make that more challenging on yourself is something I honestly don't quite understand. So
I totally agree. All right, so let's see if we have any questions from our listeners. You can raise your hand or unmute yourself. Or you can post it in the chat box, and if not, I have more questions. And I'm really glad that we're finally addressing personal responsibility here, because before we've not really called people out on that and pointed that out, that it's their responsibility. And now we're really, the Fire Safe Council is doing that as well, trying to tell people it's your responsibility. You chose to live in this area and you have to do what you can to be safer.
I'd like to maybe just mention something on that note is, I'll go ahead and share my screen here again. I thought that this was a great point. It's very poignant going along with what you just said there, a message directly from some of our information. It says, the reality is during a major wildfire, there will simply not be enough fire engines or firefighters to defend every home, especially during the first hours of a major wildfire. So you must become part of the solution. Being part of the solution means in advance. Being part of the solution means coming together as a community, helping one another, identifying who needs help on their property, doing our own clearance, helping the fire department to make those stubborn inspections that we can't quite get to, as Matt was alluding to, the different ways that we might go about making some of these inspections and verifying some of the concerns that our community members have. But it's important that this is done before these fires hit.
Yeah, we're in total agreement on that. So Robert, did you have a question you're trying to ask? If so, please go ahead and unmute yourself.
No, I just wanted to let you guys know I joined a little late due to prior commitments, but I'm here now, and so far I've heard good information that you guys are covering so far. So I'm here with you.
Thank you. We appreciate that.
Yes, no problem.
Okay, so I know that this one is not, some of these questions are not about personal responsibility, but I want to ask them anyway. And I know not long ago we did a webinar on fire ecology, and it was fascinating. And Captain Kinnison walked us through the French fire, like how the French fire moves so quickly. It was absolutely fascinating. And someone is asking the question, what is the relationship between vegetation and wildfire threat? I know you covered it briefly, but if you could talk about it a little more.
I can touch on that. I would say the chief is probably even more better at answering this one even than I am, but without vegetation, without fuels, there is no wildfire. So if we're in an area that has more forest, more vegetation, which is a fuel, there's more chance for fire. Now, the condition of the fuel, if it's really dry, that's clearly going to burn. It's going to be more receptive to burn. It's going to burn more intense with more intensity, as well as what the shape, the size, the continuity of the fuels are, the vegetation are. If you just have an occasional bush here and there, that may not be as significant as having very dense, continuous types of vegetation. So all of these different things are a direct part of that fire, wildfires. When we think of fires, we think of the weather, we think of topography, we think of the fuel. So it is let's say a third of the process when we're considering wildfires. Vegetation makes up a massive component of that.
Yeah, and my apologies, I called him Captain. I meant to say Chief Kinnison.
If I may, as far as the vegetation goes, so as it pertains to wildfire, so we have different fuel types. We have grasses, we have brush, we have heavy timbers, and they all burn at a different rate. And so mitigating, it's really easy to catch the light flashy stuff on fire, but the issue with that is once that feeds into the brush, then the brush produces more heat, more and faster drying effect on the heavier fuels, which may initially have more humidity, more water, more in them. But as that brush gets hotter, those fuels get drier. Those are much harder to put out. That's much more labor intensive. Wildland firefighters don't have a lot of water compared to city firefighters. Mm-hmm. So it's much more difficult. So if we can break that chain to go from the light to the medium to the heavy, if we can break that somewhere, we can get in there with less water and we can move faster and we can surround things. It goes back to one of the biggest threats in a wildfire is wildfires create their own weather, wind being the primary one, and the embers on the light flashy fuels and the brush and stuff like that, those will travel 4 miles. And so you can have the head of the fire, the main part of the fire, and you can have another fire a mile in front of it across all your lines, all your containment, and you're starting over from square one. That's why in some of those initial slides that Captain Freeborn was showing us, that 0 to 5 foot zone that we're just now starting to talk about, the other terminology they call it is an ember-free zone. So if an ember comes into that area and there's no mulch and there's no vegetation, there's nowhere for it to go. It's going to go out. But if there is even dry grass. It could, work up the side of that house. It could get into a vent. That's one of the main reasons we don't have wood shake shingles on there. They can get into the gaps in those. The places those little inverters can work their way into is amazing. But it is a direct, the brush and the clearance has a direct effect on the wildfire and its intensity and our ability to deal with them.
Okay, thank you. So Ted, you had your hand up. If you have a question, unmute yourself, please.
Yes, I had a question regarding trees. Is there any logic, like, is it good to have trees over your house? Like I keep all mine cut back on my house, but I see some houses where trees are over the top of it. So I was curious, what is the philosophy on trees living up in an area? I'm in Pine Mountain Club. So is there guidelines, rules? Do you want to keep it away from the side of the house? Because that can be an expensive thing if you have to do a major tree surgery.
Right. Yes, there's several specific things detailing with trees, and then there's some other just the consequential things of having trees. So the things that are required currently is if you have tree branches overhanging your roof, that's overhanging a stovepipe or a source of heat, fireplace, those types of things, those should be cut back minimum of 10 feet back, just because the heat will eventually dry that area out. And, being a pine tree, if it drops needles and, in those types of things. The other thing is if you have, we're trying to eliminate what's called ladder fuels. So a fire that starts at the ground level, working its way up into the tops of a tree, and then they'll actually go across the tops of a tree. And the requirement for that is if you have a large tree, to limb the tree up 6 foot from the ground up. If you have a smaller tree, sapling, it's just a third. Obviously, if you have an 8-foot tree, we're not going to ask you to trim 6 feet off the branch. You're going to kill the thing. So it's basically those. And then if you have any dead branches in that 6 foot, above 6 foot, we're not asking you to scale a tree and cut that type of stuff. But anything that would affect the ladder fuels, those are the specific requirements. The other secondary, I don't know if requirements is the right word, but if you have trees over your house, just in general, it is required to keep your roof clear of pine needles and leaf litter and those types. Same thing with your gutters. Those two are incredibly important when it comes to the embers, because that ember is looking for something to start. And if the leaves on your roof catch, it doesn't take much for it to work its way, find a gap into the home. So as far as the trees over a roof specifically, there's no requirement, but just be aware that you're probably going to end up cleaning the roof and the gutters and, leaf litter around the base of the home, near the home, more often. As far as dead trees, we don't have any requirement. We don't for removing those. I know there's a lot of bark beetle kills and stuff in this county. We don't have any specific requirements for that. And as far as live trees up against the house, there should be some space between it. Again, just for the ladder fuel aspect of it, if you have a small grass fire, reach into a tree that is up against your house, now it's basically you have a flame up against the side of your house. So
great, thank you.
You're welcome.
And to add to that, what about trees that are kind of overhanging propane tanks? How far up should there be clearance?
As far as propane tanks, the only real requirement is 10 foot of ground clearance around them in a circumference. So as we say, down to mineral soil, which is earth, so any leaves or grass or leaf litter or duff, that type of stuff should be removed around. Trees overhanging a propane tank are not really much of an issue, other than similar to over a roof where it's going to drop a lot of leaf litter. So you don't have to necessarily clean the tree around the propane tank, but you will have to get the leaves and the things the tree leaves behind on the ground.
Okay. Okay, there's another question here about the businesses. In Pine Mountain Club, we have the Village, and we have like a lot of commercial, not a lot, there's about 20 commercial buildings, and a lot of them are older buildings, and they have those shake roofs, and they're covered with pine needles. Are they inspected? Are they notified that they need to clean those roofs?
To be honest, the short answer is no. The hazard reduction program is focused solely on homeowners in single family homes, but that is something that can be handled. We can write a notice of violation for those types of things. It's not specifically handled during the hazard reduction season. So if somebody wanted to complain to the local fire station, the station can come out and write an inspection, and it's a miscellaneous inspection, but it's still, the criteria is no different. It's still this criteria. So if they have a lot of leaf litter and a lot of combustibles on the roof, that needs to be cleared, and it is in violation. And we just don't inspect those as a routine business. So our hazard reduction season for the engine companies, usually it starts in June 2nd, and we try to have all the inspections completed and everything done by September. But just because it's not in those months doesn't mean if there's a fire hazard, you can't let the local fire station know. We still are empowered to send a notice and go, hey, you guys need to clean this up. This is still a hazardous situation. It's still, we're still public safety. It's just not done in the routine, daily business of the hazard reduction program.
Got it. Okay.
One way to kind of think about that is if a parent says, hey, we're having guests here Saturday, you got to have that room cleaned up by Saturday. Well, that doesn't mean after the guests leave that the next week, the parents walk by the kids' room and it's a mess, and they say, hey, you got to get this cleaned up. So it's the same with the properties. We may go through and make those inspections starting after June 1st, but it's viable for citation. It's still a year-round thing that we want individuals to get in the habit of making sure that the property is looking good year-round.
That was one of my questions was, does it make sense to keep the space cleared all year round? And it seems to me it makes it easier.
Yeah, it's
rush all at once come June, right?
Yeah. It's like, we'll have people tell us like, I had to take 7 truckloads out, and it's like, well, why didn't you didn't have to do it in this last week. You could have spread it out over the last several months, kind of thing. So
it seems to make sense. Okay, so Kara, you have a question. If you would unmute yourself and ask your question, please.
Yeah, I just wonder what the firefighters think about our state commissioners, insurance commissioners' new rules and policies that he's coming up with. He just recently posted that this February. So, or have you even heard of them?
So I'm not exactly sure which items of that you're referring to. As a government agency, we're just going to continue to work with the resources we're provided with. We're going to continue to operate within the framework that we're legally allowed to, the authority that we're given. If laws are created at the state or county level that give us a little bit more freedom or give us some more funding or allow us to take on new responsibilities, we will continue to do that with the same integrity and service that we're trying to do currently.
Okay, thank you.
I can't speak specifically to that. I will say that just being in the hazard reduction program, I will say that they are actively looking at any and all aspects of hazard reduction. So I wouldn't be surprised if there's things that they're going to modify in the near future.
Yeah, that would make sense. Okay, I've got a couple more questions. You've answered, I have this whole list and you've answered most of them. Okay, here's a question. In the mountains, as you know, we have a lot of slopes. So a lot of our properties have steep slopes down the back. And somebody is asking, how do you maintain the bushes on your property when it's growing on this slope? that you can hardly walk on.
Right. It's a challenge, and so I think the key to it is honestly with a lot of this program is common sense. So the slopes do make it harder. There was a slide that Captain Freeborn showed where, you may have to trim back more than what's required due to slopes. However, what I would say is the best thing you could do is to work from the house out. If you can't get to the slope, say your house is 25 feet away from the edge of the slope and the slope's too steep to get down, we're not asking you guys to put yourselves in danger, but I would redouble my efforts on the part that you can deal with. I would make sure that there is no leaf litter or no pine needles. If you could, walk down the slope a few feet, I would make sure that, you would get as much of that out as you can. I'm not, I understand that folks that live in these areas enjoy the wilderness, and I'm not asking you to do anything to destroy your view or to make it any less pleasant for you. But, you may have to go beyond the minimum that's required for the areas directly around your house. So, and if if you can get down to the slopes and do some sort of work, it's better than nothing. If you can, if you have trees and brush and grass and you can get in there and at least cut, fire breaks along through the grass, or remove some of it. If you have brush that are all continuous, so there's no gap in between, if you can somehow manage to just get a gap, just do the best you can is what we're asking. And again, if you were to do that, and if that scenario did play out and you did receive a citation, please, contact us through the email and explain your situation. We're not, we're bound by state law, but it doesn't mean we don't have leeway. We understand that, that you can't get down the slope, and we sure as heck don't, we don't want you doing anything to endanger yourself. So,
okay. So you say email to where?
Let's see here. There is our address is hazard reduction at kerncountyfire.org. So okay. That's hazard reduction, all one word, at kerncountyfire.org.
Okay, that's perfect. Thank you. And I've got one more question, and then we're going to move on because we're getting toward the end here. So someone is asking if you know of any assistant programs to help homeowners create this defensible space.
We do. Well, we call them a service provider. That's also on our website at kerncountyfire.org. You can just search in the search bar type in service provider, or if you go under the hazard reduction tab. And what they are they are local people. We divide them up into three main regions: Lake Isabella, the Tehachapi's, and the Fraser Park Pine Mountain Club areas. These people on our list, there are others, but the people on our list have specifically gone through a class where we've explained to them exactly what's expected from the Kern County Fire Department. We tell them about, the clearances and the trees, and now they're still independent contractors, so it's important that if somebody were to hire them, that they negotiate the deal with them, and we recommend that they take pictures of before and after, so that way all parties involved are happy with the deal. So obviously, if somebody were to have this work done and then they were to receive a citation, you could show us the pictures. It's possible. That's one of the things that it's difficult with, and this is why we do have some leeway. Is these guys get real busy real quick, and so they may not be able to come out to the 10th. Well, for whatever reason, the station might have gone by on the 3rd. You know what I mean? And then he can send us a picture going, no, this was done on the 10th within that 15 days. And we're like, okay, that was our mistake, so we, we've tried in the past to find like low income type options, and unfortunately, we don't have any contacts with that. The only list that we provide are just the service providers, and those are individual. Everybody sets their individual rates. So, and it depends on the work, of course, too. Like if they're going to be doing tree trimming versus just mowing the grass and those types of things. So,
yeah. And the other thing we didn't mention that I think is worth mentioning is that if you have a tree that's hanging on the wires on the power lines, SCE has a program to come out and inspect that and take those trees, those trees off. So that's something that people, and they don't charge for that. So that's a service people could take advantage of. So we've that's all we have time for tonight. I want to thank you both so much. This is such useful information. And if anybody has a question that wasn't answered, or you think of a different question during the week, contact our website at kernfiresafe.org and we'll get you an answer to your question. And I want to tell you about next month. We're having a special series of webinars. This is really exciting. These are from 4th and 5th graders in the Kern County schools who attended the Kern Fire Safe Council's Living Safer in Kern's Wildlands school program, and it was great. They were 2-day programs. We had the fire department helped on one day, and we had Forest Service on another day, and the kids loved it. And these young enthusiastic experts are going to share with us what they learned to keep Kern County fire safer. And we say safer instead of safe because that's all we can do is be safer. And so anyway, we're looking forward to that. That's going to be really fun to hear what those kids have to say. And until then, keep your space defensible, pack your go bag, and be ready for fire. You are in the forest after all. This is Julia Neiman on behalf of Kern Fire Safe Council, wishing you all a good night.